Hello, you're watching Policy Beats with me, Hamzah Rifaat. Joe Biden has become the 46th president of the United States. Kamala Harris has become the first female vice president of the United States. The Democrats have actually swept the election, and they've ensured that the demagoguery of the Donald Trump administration is replaced with values which America and American democracy considers to be quite dear to them. Joe Biden came up with his inauguration address yesterday, where he spoke about different aspects of where America needs course correction. He spoke about the importance of ensuring that multilateralism does take place on the foreign policy front. And he also spoke about ensuring that the divisions which have actually seeped into American society, whether it's regarding racial injustice or the overall insurrection that we actually witnessed on Capitol Hill, can actually be tackled accordingly. Joe Biden's speech gave hope to Americans, and it also gives plenty of hope for many countries all across the world. He does have a South Asia policy as well, and what would his policy implications be for countries such as Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh in our region? That is what we're going to be discussing in this show today. I have with me Senior Associate of South Asia at the Wilson Center, Mr. Michael Kugelman, here on Policy Beats. Mr. Michael Kugelman, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
Michael, before we start off with Biden's policy towards Pakistan, I would like to speak about the cabinet that he has. He has General Lloyd Austin as the Secretary of Defense in his cabinet. And obviously, Pakistan and America share a very deep and important defense relationship. And the American strategy towards the United States has been based upon the AFPAC strategy as well. What do you think of his appointment of General Austin? What implications of this move would actually be for the Pakistan government and the future of U.S. Pakistan ties?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I think that this appointment could actually work well for U.S. Pakistan relations. I mean, Austin, like many of these top Biden administration officials, or at least the ones that have been announced so far, they know Pakistan well. And in the case of Austin, this is someone that knows Pakistan extremely well and has worked with with Pakistan, particularly through his role when he was with CENTCOM. And I was struck in his confirmation hearing some days ago, when asked to speak about the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, he offered a very complimentary appraisal of Pakistan and the U.S.-Pakistan security relationship. And it didn't necessarily go against what Trump administration officials have said, but I mean, he did refer to Pakistan as an important partner, as an important player. And I think at a moment when the future of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is a bit in flux, I think it would be reassuring for supporters of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, and certainly those in Islamabad, to hear him offer such an upbeat assessment about the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. So I think that he could certainly benefit the relationship in his role.
Okay, and we've heard from Washington the do more mantra as far as doing more as far as militancy is concerned. So far, Donald Trump has shared a very important relationship with the Imran Khan government. Obviously, you might recall the Prime Minister's visit to Washington over the previous years, where he spoke about ensuring that American-Pakistani relations could actually be strengthened. But on the do more mantra and the drone program, do you think that the Biden doctrine would continue Obama's policies within Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, yeah, there's a tendency to worry that we could have that this administration could be like Obama 2.0, just because so many of the top people in this administration, including the president himself, had served in the Obama administration. But I don't think we should look at it that way. The dynamics of the region, of Pakistan and the region, have changed significantly since 2016, when the Obama administration left office. And I know that in Pakistan there's a tendency to think of anyone associated with the Obama administration as a strong proponent of the drone war, just because it was Obama that really scaled up a drone war that had been begun by his predecessor, George W. Bush. But I really don't think that there's much of an interest in Washington and within the new administration to, for example, ramp up the drone war, especially because, for no other reason, that I think many here have concluded that many of the top targets have been eliminated. And of course, Pakistan's own very successful counterterrorism operations that began in 2014 have really made the terrorism problem much less serious than it had been some years ago. Now, you talk about the do more mantra.
Right, absolutely.
I do think that this is an administration that will not be afraid to call out and criticize countries on issues like rights and democracy, even though you could argue there's a bit of a hypocrisy given what happened here at the Capitol some time back, but I don't think that's going to affect the Biden administration all that much. I think that what one might have to worry about from a Pakistani perspective is that the India focus groups in Pakistan, those could come more into the crosshairs of the Biden administration, just because with the U.S.-India relationship, the U.S.-India security relationship improving in a big way, India will always be focused on those types of groups. I think that you could hear the Biden administration, not necessarily publicly, but perhaps privately, pushing Pakistan to deal more with those groups, even though Pakistan has already cracked down on them significantly. And even if Pakistan gets off the gray list of the Financial Action Task Force, that may not necessarily stop the Biden administration from continuing to push Pakistan to deal with those groups. So unfortunately for Pakistan, I don't know if the do more days will have disappeared altogether.
Right, Michael, now you spoke about India. Now, Biden also has an Indo-Pacific strategy as well. You could say it's a continuation of the Trump administration to a large extent, where India is to play a far more significant role in Southeast Asia, as well as in the South China Sea. Now, this policy does not only irk Pakistan, but it also irks China as well. We've seen Biden's appointment as far as the National Intelligence Advisor is concerned. Avril Haines claimed that to counter China's intelligence, that is going to be a top priority for this administration. How concerned should Pakistan and China be with regard to this Indo-Pacific strategy if it actually materializes in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I imagine there'll be a fair amount of continuity between Trump and Biden on this Indo-Pacific strategy. And it's notable that in its last days in power, the Trump administration declassified and released a strategic framework document for the Indo-Pacific that had originally been drafted, I think, in 2018. And I think one reason why the Trump administration declassified it was to send a message to the Biden administration and a broader audience that, this is a strategy that needs to be continued, a strategy that revolves around pushing back, working with allies and partners in Asia to push back against China. I think what we've seen with the Biden administration so far, and of course it's very early days, is that this will be an administration that will definitely look at China as a strategic threat, just as the Trump administration did, and as a country that will want to work with others, not just in Asia, but more broadly, particularly in Europe and elsewhere, to develop a broader consensus and coalition to counterbalance China. Now, there will be some differences. I do think that the Biden administration will pursue this policy with a bit of a happier face, so to speak. I think that we will see this administration try to reach out to China in ways that it can, in areas that it thinks have potential for cooperation, particularly areas like climate change and also public health, some areas like that. And that could, I think, make things easier.
Which underlines its commitment towards multilateralism.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is an administration that's going to emphasize, global solutions to global challenges. It's going to emphasize multilateralism, and in that regard, if there's potential to work with China on issues like climate change, that's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing for the world. It's a good thing for Pakistan. It's a good thing for China, just because I know that Pakistan would like it would like the U.S. to have a better relationship with China, and Pakistan would like to have a good relationship with both the U.S. And China. John Kerry has been appointed as climate change czar at the National Security Council. He really wants to work. He wants to make climate change the entire issue that revolves around the U.S.-China relationship.
Right, absolutely. Now, coming to Afghanistan, Michael, if we speak about because often when we look at Pakistan, it's coined as an AFPAC strategy from Washington, D.C. And Pakistan has obviously played a key role in ensuring that the Afghan peace process actually materializes for a greater security of the environment and to ensure that economic cooperation in the region can actually take place as well. On Afghanistan, do you see Pakistan's interests with the United States actually converging, or do you see any sort of, potential, you could say, flashpoint between the two sides?
Well, I mean, I think right now their interests converge, and this is really why the U.S.-Pakistan relationship improved after a few years of very bad relations in the Trump era. Certainly, they both support the idea of a peace and reconciliation process, and they support the peace process as currently envisaged, as it's playing out. And certainly, both the U.S. and Pakistan earlier on were very much behind this idea of bilateral negotiations between the U.S. and the Taliban. But beyond that, it's hard to say. I think that since the U.S. is on its way out of Afghanistan, it's not going to be as focused on what exactly its ideal endgame is in Afghanistan, which I think is problematic from the perspective of U.S. interests. But the current peace process, if it plays out successfully, that would be very beneficial, I think, for Pakistan, not just because of an end to the war, but also because the Taliban would have a key role in government, and that would ensure Pakistani access and interest and influence in Afghanistan. I think the U.S. ideally would prefer that there not be a post-war government in which the Taliban wields a significant role. But if you get a situation where the Taliban agrees to truly stop fighting and de-arm and join peaceful society, the U.S. certainly would not have a problem with that. But these are a lot of big ifs right here. And bottom line, I'll end here. I think the bigger question is if the peace process does not succeed, if it flounders and falls apart, the war intensifies.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question, Michael. When we talk about troop deployment and what was actually agreed in Doha between the Trump administration and the Taliban, do you see that policy continuing? Because when we talk about troop withdrawals, there are many analysts all across the world who consider that Biden would be far more, he would be more amiable towards the idea of ensuring that there is significant amount of troop presence in Afghanistan so that a doomsday scenario can actually be avoided. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, it's very unclear. To this point, the Biden administration has not been clear on what it wants to do with its troop posture. Clearly, I think that Biden is not a fan of of extended overseas military presences, and he's going to inherit 2,500 troops. And I think for him, the key objective will be to figure out how to maintain some type of a U.S. counterterrorism capacity in Afghanistan, especially if you don't have any troops left there. It's sort of harder to maintain that capacity if you have to base troops in another country. But certainly, I think there is a lot of concern everywhere, not just in Washington, but everywhere. But if all of those troops leave, if all of the remaining US, NATO troops leave Afghanistan, in the absence of a peace deal, then things could really get dicey in Afghanistan, with the Taliban benefiting and in a position to start seizing urban spaces and perhaps even threaten to take over power altogether.
Right, Michael, now my last question, which is $1 million question, every Pakistani wants to know about this, is the fact that what would Biden's Kashmir strategy be? Because we've seen the Indian illegal annexation of the Kashmir territory, and we've also seen the brutality which has been unleashed by the BJP government against the Kashmiri population. And Pakistan has been repeatedly and quite vociferously calling for ensuring that the humanitarian aspect of the Kashmir dispute or the annexation is actually propped up in all international forums. What would Biden's strategy towards Biden's Kashmir policy be, given that he has repeatedly said that he is committed towards humanitarian issues?
Yeah, this is indeed a big question. And I think that there was a watershed moment when India revoked Article 370, because I think that woke the world up to how significant and how volatile and potentially destabilizing this Kashmir issue is. I think that Pakistan should not get its hopes up too much about what the Biden administration may be willing to do on Kashmir. Yes, there was some comments on the campaign trail from Biden and also Kamala Harris about how troubling the situation is in Kashmir, and Harris had talked about the need to restore the rights of Kashmiris. But this is where you have a collision, this collision that you have so frequently in international relations between morality, the notion of trying to bring attention to terrible things happening in other countries, coupled with realpolitik and interests. And I think that given how much importance the US and the Biden administration will place in the strategic partnership it has with India, I think it's going to go relatively easy on India. I think you may get more of a tendency in private conversations for senior officials to gently push India to try to rein in some of what it's doing in Kashmir. But in terms of public condemnation, public criticism, I don't think you're going to hear much of that at all. And I definitely don't think that the Biden administration would try to get India to talk to Pakistan, renegotiate the situation there. I mean, India would just say that there's nothing to talk about because we've repealed Article 370. I just don't think this is something that the Biden administration
would
will push.
Biden buy that argument? Would he buy that argument that there's nothing to talk about? Because Pakistan has constantly maintained that there is plenty to talk about with regard to Kashmir.
Yeah, I think that Biden would agree there's something to talk about when it comes to the human rights situation in Kashmir. And I think to the extent that there's criticism, it would be limited to that. I don't think that the Biden administration would think that there's a need for the U.S. to be getting into the legal dimensions and the territorial issues at play. I mean, the U.S. position has been very consistent on Kashmir for years, and I imagine Biden will stay true to that position, and that is that this is a bilateral matter to be worked out by India and Pakistan. Even when Donald Trump offered to mediate, he said he would only do it if both sides asked him to, which is basically like sort of a polite way of staying out, because he knew that India was not going to ask him to mediate.
Right. Michael Kugelman, Senior Associate of South Asia at the Wilson Center, thank you so much for joining me on Policy Beats.
Thank you.
So that's all that we have for now for this edition of Policy Beats. Biden administration brings a lot of promise for U.S.-Pakistan relations, but there are plenty of key areas that need more deliberation, and we need to look forward to the prospect of a future where both countries can look forward to ensuring that their relationship is actually kept intact. Now, to follow us further, you may log on to our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for further updates from Policy Beats. And from me, Hamzah Rifaat, we will keep you posted as far as social media is concerned. Till then, take care and stay safe.